Australia. We'd like to thank the conference organisers for the opportunity to present this overview of the findings of an assessment of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on food systems in the Indo-Pacific region. This assessment was funded by the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research and implemented by a team from the Australian National University and CSIRO in partnership with colleagues in the region. Our research was implemented from May to August this year, and it looked at the first 6 months of the pandemic. It was comprised of 4 main components. Firstly, looking at pre-existing exposures and vulnerabilities. Secondly, the impacts of COVID-19 on food systems. Thirdly, recovery and resilience factors, and importantly, looking at opportunities for action. Looking at our analytical framework in more detail, we expanded Allen and Prosperi's framework to increase the number of steps from 4 to 10. First step was, what's the system or systems of interest? And in our case, we had 5 focal geographies, including Indonesia, Pacific Island countries, and this included 7 countries that were clustered into 3 groups according to their farming systems: Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, and Timor-Leste. 2, what were the direct and indirect impacts of the pandemic? 3, what other shocks and drivers of change were simultaneously impacting on food systems, and how were they interacting with COVID-19? 4, what food system outcomes are desired? Very important point. 5, how exposed is the system to COVID-19 and the other drivers? 6, what are the sensitivities, meaning what's the magnitude of the consequences and what have been the impacts on the food system? 7, what's the current recovery potential of the system? 8, how resilient is the system? 9, what responses are needed to boost recovery potential? And 10, what are the impacts on regional and global drivers of change? So let's have a quick look at the 10 pre-existing exposures and vulnerabilities that we found to be common across all focal geographies. Firstly, there was a dependence on food imports. The countries and regions are already experiencing climate change and extreme weather event, persistent nutritional challenges, growing informal labour and economic marginalisation, persistent gender inequity, data gaps. There's a big focus on big data, but unless you've got good, robust data, it's very difficult to make sound decisions. And what we found was there was significant data gaps across agriculture, health, transport, etc. And this is a major issue that does need to be solved if we're to be able to manage future crises better. Patchy biosecurity and health services, chronic underfunding of human, animal and plant health services are contributing to the pressures on the food system. Fragmented value chains and food systems governance, rapid population growth and poor risk communication. We're going to have a look at some of these in a little more detail as we go through the presentation. If we look at impacts of COVID-19 on food systems, what we found, unsurprisingly, was a loss of employment and incomes, growing food insecurity, growing employment insecurity, disrupted value chains and agricultural supply chains, declining demand and access to food, and reduced access to agricultural supplies, and in particular, reduced timely access to agriculture. And this is very important for rain-fed agriculture. And sadly, increased gender-based discrimination, and this was common across the region. We look at the factors that have the potential to contribute to recovery and resilience. What we found significantly was the availability of imported staple foods, and where food system governance was functioning, the potential for recovery was enhanced. And we wanted to highlight here the achievements of ASEAN nations, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, who had learnt from past crises. They worked very quickly to stabilize the price of rice and worked also collectively to work out systems that would improve food security in the region during this pandemic. Associated with our conference today, the increased recognition of the importance of food systems has been a positive. Using social protection to enhance resilience going forward has enormous potential to really yield multiple benefits. There were excellent examples of local value chains contributing to food and nutrition security, and importantly, the agility of certain food systems to be able to respond and adapt to the rapidly changing situation that unfolded as a result of the pandemic. What we wanted to do was to use these findings to come up with opportunities for action, and clearly this is very important. We've divided our recommendations across 3 time frames, and these covering looking at the next 12 months, looking at up to 2025, and then to 2030. Our assessment is available for free download, so you can track down all the details if you're interested, and we hope you will be. To meet our time restrictions today, I'm simply going to focus on one recommendation for each time frame. In the case of the next 12 months, we'd like to highlight the importance of doing risk communication more effectively. The case of decreased demand for poultry products in many countries in the region is a case in point. News of the COVID-19 pandemic resulted in misinformation spreading rapidly via social media that poultry products were a source of the virus. Interestingly, many of these countries had previously experienced significant problems with high pathogenic avian influenza H5N1, which is also caused by a virus. Clearly, there's much to be done by 2025, and so one of our key recommendations relates to the importance of strategic partnerships and innovative funding collaborations as we seek to recover from the impact of the pandemic and simultaneously transform food systems so that they uniformly contribute to positive health, nutrition, and environmental outcomes. Given the impact of the pandemic on economies, we definitely need to find ways to do more with less. Over the coming decade, we strongly recommend that much more is invested in future farmers to ensure that young women and men farmers are excited by and actually adequately remunerated for their services to society. We need to do much better in relation to tailored education and equitable marketing. Our synopsis chapter of the assessment strongly recommends adopting a holistic systems approach to support coordinated, effective use of funds and resources across all sectors. In particular, we highlight the opportunities to implement an integrated all-hazard systems approach that works in partnership with all partners and in harmony with national and global commitments, such as the Sustainable Development Goals. Hopefully, this quick overview will whet your appetite for a deeper dive into our assessment. Finally, we do want to thank you for your interest in sustainable food systems, because no one individual, group, or sector can deliver ethical and ecologically sustainable food systems, but together we have to. Thanks again, and stay safe.